Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Taylor Combluzia, a mining analyst at Red Cloud Securities. Today's webinar features Midnight Sun Mining, which is exploring for copper cobalt deposits in the prolific Zambia-Congo copper belt. The belt is known to be the second largest copper producing region in the world, and the company's flagship Solwezi project is a pre-resource stage asset spanning over 50,000 hectares in Zambia. The property hosts 5 targets and is primarily being explored for copper, accompanied by cobalt and nickel. There are multiple world-class active copper mines and mining companies within under 200 kilometers of Solwezi. Today I have with me on the webinar Adrian O'Brien, who's the Director of Marketing and Communications at Midnight Sun. Good to have you with us, Adrian.
Great to be here, Taylor. Really appreciate it.
So the format of today's webinar will be comprised of 2 parts. In the first part, Adrian will provide an introduction to Midnight Sun and then tell you what you have to look forward to through this year and into the next. And then in the second part, we'll take your questions live. So please send us your questions using the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. I'll note that you can type your questions into the chat box at any time during the presentation. So to start, I'll handle the disclosures and then we'll get into it. So for Midnight Sun, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this call. I would direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of the Midnight Sun corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for Midnight Sun specific disclosures. So now I'll turn it over to Adrian to introduce you to Midnight Sun and what you have to look forward to with this company.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Taylor. This is always a pleasure working with you guys and doing this webinar today. I'm really looking forward to it. We've got a lot to talk about, and basically I'm going to go into a good overview of the project, the company, and what we're working on. But of course, we have announced now that we've kicked off one of 2 major programs. So I'm going to get into some detail around that, talk about what we're doing, talk about the timeline, and what we're attacking. So of course, as we always say, transformative copper discoveries in the heart of Zambia. You know, the reality is there are very few companies working in the part of Zambia that we're working in that are not the biggest major mining companies on the planet. We are very fortunate to be in a position. It took 12 years of diligence to stay the course to be there. And we are in the absolute heart of what they call the Domes region of Zambia. So it's a pretty exciting place to be. And certainly a huge opportunity for those involved. So we have a very large project. We are 506 square kilometers centered right in the heart of the Zambian Domes region. And so when you're looking at Zambia, as I'll show you on a graphic in just a moment, you have the traditional Zambia-Congo copper belt, which tracks northwest, southeast, and then you have what they call the Domes region. The Domes region is an incredible jurisdiction that's east-west trending, roughly 150 kilometers east to west, maybe 100 kilometers north to south. And if you throw a 100-kilometer net over our property, you will capture First Quantum, Barrick, Rio Tinto, Anglo, now Ivanhoe. Of course, Ivanhoe last week has announced that they are partnering with the Zambian government. The Zambian government is essentially going to flow them geological ideas and geological data to allow them to come into the country and look for new projects and new ideas and fast track those. So it's a huge move. I mean, really what it tells you is that Ivanhoe is looking at Zambia the same way we are. This is the top spot. And when I'm referring to that, I'm talking about the Domes region. This is the top spot on the planet right now for copper exploration, both in terms of the size of the projects and deposits, the scale, the grade, and the ability to move these deposits from discovery to development, which is critical. So we have all of these big neighbors. Of course, we're less than 6 kilometers or around 6 kilometers away from First Quantum's Kansanshi mine. That is First Quantum's flagship. On the west side of our property, we have Barrick's Lumwana mine. Both of those play a big part in our story, and I'll go over those in detail in a moment. We have 2 critical deals in place. We have an earn-in agreement with Cobalt Metals, who I'm sure many of you have heard of. Cobalt Metals is backed by Bill Gates and Bill Gates Breakthrough Energy Ventures Fund, Anderson Horowitz, the Canadian Pension Plan, and a number of really high-profile investors, mostly through the Breakthrough Energy Ventures Fund, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, Jack Ma, rather incredible. But really what drew us to Cobalt and why we brought Cobalt into our Solwezi project is the geological team that they bring to the table, it's absolutely second to none. And they are backed, of course, by many of the biggest geological names out there. Leading the charge is Dr. David Broughton. And I have a section of the presentation on David Broughton and his accomplishments in the Domes region in sub-Saharan Africa, which I'll go over in a little bit. But unbelievable team. They're using AI technology, novel technology, machine learning in combination with traditional geoscience. And really, it's important to understand what that does. It's not a magic answer to finding a deposit. What it does, though, is it cuts out the noise and gets to the stage of a discovery much more quickly than what has traditionally been seen with geoscience. Our second deal in place is with First Quantum. So we do have a near-term production situation unfolding on our property. It's going to see us in production in somewhere around 12 months. And very, very exciting opportunity here for very, very significant cash flow for Midnight Sun, and an absolutely unique position to be in, where we're going to have upside on the exploration front with our deal with Cobalt, multiple other targets, and then near-term production with First Quantum. So without going too much further into detail, let me dive into the projects themselves. I'm sure I don't need to tell everyone here what the thesis is for copper. We are speeding towards a cliff, if you will. There is a deficit in copper that is very real, looming on the horizon, predominantly driven by manufacturing. And of course, we all hear about EVs. AI data centers, though, are really going to be the biggest driver in this going forward. But the point is, there's a reason why you're seeing these big backers behind Cobalt and companies that are looking for copper and critical metals. There are a lack of new deposits being found. There's a lack of new deposits in the pipeline for production. And today, there is a deficit looming that there is no way the world can meet. So projects like ours are absolutely critical to make a global impact in the copper world today. So what does Zambia like to work in? Phenomenal jurisdiction. Really what you're looking at is a place where if you can find a major deposit, it can be built. This is a country that is very mining friendly. They have a democratically elected government. 75% of their export earnings are copper, and they've for over 100 years have been a mining powerhouse. So it's a very good jurisdiction to be in. You have a supportive government. You have everything in place to build it. And there is a reason why First Quantum, Anglo, Barrick, Rio Tinto, Ivanhoe, all of those companies are there because they recognize that Zambia is one of the top places in the world to do this. So it is the right place to be developing a project and a good reason why we're there. So this graphic I just opened up is a great overview of the Zambia-Congo copper belt, which of course straddles the border into the DRC. So I'm going to start from the west. We have First Quantum Sentinel mine. That's 1 billion tons at 0.51% copper. A little further to the east, Barrick's Lumwana mine. That is 1 billion tons at 0.55. And as I mentioned, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of some of the things that have gone on with Lumwana. You will see that Barrick just put out news about 2 weeks ago for a feasibility study at Lumwana. That's on a satellite deposit called Lubwe, which was discovered by our Chief Operating Officer, Kevin Bonnell, who will be running our programs with First Quantum and, of course, working along with the group for Dumbwa as well with Cobalt. Ivanhoe's Kamoa-Kakula, 1.4 billion tons at nearly 3% copper. This is one of the biggest copper deposits, if not the biggest copper deposit on the planet today. It is in the Domes region, but it's inside the DRC border. And what does that mean? It means that as fantastic an asset that is, and don't get me wrong, it's phenomenal, Ivanhoe's had to give up 64% of that asset in order to move it forward. In Zambia, we own 100% of our assets. The government is not taking a vast percentage like that. This is a very easy jurisdiction with low tax rates to move something forward. So very important to note that we're on the Zambian side of the border of the Domes region. China molybdenum's Tenke deposit, it's 122 million tons, but that's 2% copper. Very, very high grade. And of course, First Quantum's Kansanshi mine in Zambia, right beside us, less than 10 kilometers away. And that is First Quantum's flagship, particularly when you look at what's gone on with Cobre Panama over the last little while. For anyone that's not familiar, we have, unfortunately, First Quantum has lost Cobre Panama for the time being. It is shut down, essentially nationalized by the Panamanian government. That's forced them to refocus at Kansanshi, which unfortunate situation for First Quantum, but a very fortunate situation for Midnight Sun. And it plays a huge part in the story that we are telling. This is the Zambian portion of the Domes region. So key thing to note here is that if you look at the 3 mines that are shown, we've got Sentinel, Lumwana, Kansanshi. Each of those is 1 billion tons. That is part of why the Domes region is the place to be. The deposits are big. They tend to be around 1 billion tons. They're high grade. They're shallow. These are stratabound copper deposits, which means they're less than 150 kilometers depth, 150 meters depth. They're very shallow. They're easy to get at. These are easy to mine and come with a much lower capex, which is why we can get these in production. But I'm going to draw your attention to these yellow outlines. These are basement domes, and those geological structures are critical to the formation of these stratabound copper deposits. You'll notice that under Sentinel, Lumwana, and Kansanshi, there is a single basement dome, while under our property, there are multiple. What that has done has created multiple geological systems on Midnight Sun's property and essentially driven the development of more than one target. So we have 3 or 4 targets here that are on this property and that are going to be addressed. And so that instantly sets us apart from the pack. It gives us more opportunity here. And of course, you can see the part of our property surrounded in purple outline, one is in green. Green is our earn-in property called Dumbwa with cobalt metals. Everything you see outlined in purple is going to fall under our First Quantum Cooperative Exploration Plan. But very important to note, the First Quantum deal only pertains to oxide copper, which is at surface, and the mining of that material. It does not affect the underlying sediment-hosted targets that we will still be going after at Kaziba, Crunch, and Me2 on the west. So again, 4 separate targets for one of these billion-ton Domes region deposits, and at the same time, near-term production potential of oxide copper at surface across our entire western flank. So looking here at Kansanshi, Lumwana, and Sentinel, average grade is around 0.59% copper. If you look at the drill highlights that we've listed below, you're looking at stuff that is vastly more impressive than what we see in the typical grade at one of these mines. But you have to remember that's a diluted grade based on an open pit mining operation. What these tell us is that we have sediment hosted systems on the property, that they're big, they're high grade, the thickness is exactly what we would expect to see, anywhere from 10 to 30 meters thick, usually 10 to 15 is the average. And basically what you want to see here on the right is that each of these drill intercepts is on another target on our property, giving us a bona fide drill discovery from one corner of our property to the next. So we like to say that there's multiple opportunities. As I've just said, you see right now that there are multiple areas, multiple sediment hosted targets. And what we've done is just simply superimpose the Kansanshi mine. This is 1 billion tons in this red outline here that you see at the upper part of our graphic. And we've superimposed that across our targets to give you an idea of the scope and scale of what we're doing here. Of course, we do have 2 targets underway. We have the cobalt earn-in, which is here in green, and then we have Kaziba and Me2. First work is going on at Kaziba. That is underway now, and we'll dive in a little bit in detail into what that is. So let's talk about Dumbwa first. We have a $15.5 million earn-in with cobalt metals, and that's going to be a very exciting thing to develop as we go. But let's talk about what's actually under the ground here at Dumbwa. Why are we excited, and why did cobalt come to the table? What you see here in the middle of this graphic, that purple blob, is a 20-kilometer long soil anomaly at 0.73% copper. That is virtually unheard of in Zambia. It's the highest soil anomaly on record in the country. And your peak value of 0.73 occurs in numerous locations. It's high grade throughout the whole thing. 20 kilometers is very, very large. But there are other key things here that tell you that there's a big system at play. So geologically, what got us excited and what got other groups excited and motivated to come to the table? 20-kilometer long soil anomaly at 0.73% copper, that is ore grade copper in soil. On top of that, you have these drill highlights listed on the left. These were drilled, some by First Quantum, some by us. Every one of those drill intercepts is economic. Some of these start at surface. In the case of SDDD 06, 13.5 meters of 0.77% copper. That starts in bedrock at surface with 0 strip. There's no overburden on that. So that means that this deposit is actually, or this system is actually coming up at surface. Take that a little bit further. We did negotiate with Barrick, and basically the Barrick work came down here. They walked the ground in 2023, and they sampled right where this arrow comes across into the property. they got 1.3% copper in bedrock at surface. So certainly got Barrick very excited and motivated enough to prepare a couple of offers. Taking that one step further, down at the property boundary here, you'll notice that the anomaly extends just slightly over the southern boundary. All of this property to the south is owned by a major. That major went in here to do some work. There is a well-known open pit that sits just on the other side of our property boundary. It's mined by locals. Typically, it's 3.5% copper on average. And so that major backed up about 100 meters, punched one hole into this anomaly, and they hit something in the range of 15 meters of 3 to 5% copper. It was an incredible intercept. They came back to the camp and basically said, look, we hit the tail of it, but Midnight Sun owns the body, and then came to the table with a couple of offers, neither of which we went with. Kobold was the group for us, and there's a very, very simple reason, I guess 3 simple reasons as to why we went with Kobold. Number one, why Kobold came to us in the first place was David Broughton. 8 years ago, David Broughton, and just to give you a little quick overview, David Broughton has worked for the last 14 years or so with Ivanhoe Metals. He's worked with Ivanhoe Mining. He's worked with Robert Friedland, and he's credited with the discovery of Kamoa-Kakula. He also did all of the development work at Kansanshi, and so it would be argued that he's probably one of the top stratabound copper experts in the world, as is Kevin Bonnell, who's our chief operating officer. And interesting as to how each of these people came to be a part of this story. David Broughton came to us 8 years ago, and I love telling this story. When he came to us, he basically said, look, I don't know how the heck you guys got this property. I don't know how you ended up in the heart of the Domes region, but you have the top target in all of Zambia. You have a tier 1 exploration target. Whatever you do, don't lose it. Sell your house, mortgage your house, do whatever you have to do. Keep this property, don't lose it. So we obviously listened. He's been around us now for almost 8 years, and he eventually retired from Ivanhoe, shortly after which he was hired by Kobold Metals as their chief copper geologist. The very first thing that David recommended to Kobold was to do a deal with us on Dumbwa, and that brought Kobold to the table in concert, of course, with this big discovery that was made to the south of us. What was really cool about that is that David, stayed true to what he had told us originally. He brought Kobold in, and Kobold stayed focused on a single target, whereas the other deals that came to the table for us were focused on the entire property. That's not ideal. The other group that was at the table here a year and a half ago was Barrick. Barrick was very interested in the project, but basically the deals that we had on the table from Barrick were not ideal. I think the story about how Barrick came to the table, though, is really critical to what's going on now with First Quantum, with what we're doing, and that was led by Kevin Bonnell. Kevin Bonnell is a phenomenal geologist. He actually worked with David Broughton at Freeport-McMoRan when Freeport was originally working in sub-Saharan Africa. Freeport, of course, pulled out of the country 20 years ago. They pulled out of Africa entirely 20 years ago. But while Kevin Bonnell was working there, he was aware of Dumbwa. He was aware of the work that First Quantum had done on this property. He was aware of this target. And fast forward a number of years, of course, Barrick acquired the Lumwana mine next door to us. Lumwana is, 1 billion tons at 0.55, but it was a tier 2 asset when it was first picked up. And of course, Barrick paid a very, very large sum of money to Equinox for that deposit, in excess of $5 billion. They overpaid by a mile. They tried for 15 years to unravel Lumwana, and they couldn't do it. 4 years ago, they parachuted Kevin Bonnell in. Kevin Bonnell was brought in to look at Lumwana, to figure it out, to see if he could sort it out and turn it into a tier 1 asset. In 24 months, Kevin built them 50 years of reserves. He found something called Lubwe, which is a satellite deposit. And eventually that was put forward all the way to feasibility. You'll see the release that came out 2 weeks ago from Barrick announcing that feasibility study. And that is going to move Lumwana into not just tier 1 asset territory. It may just be one of the biggest deposits in the belt. Super exciting. And Kevin was responsible for that. But how that plays a part here is that following Kevin's work at Lumwana, he immediately wrote a 100-page report that was delivered to Mark Bristow talking about how good Dumbwa was as a target and his recommendation for Barrick to come and do an earn-in agreement with us on Dumbwa and to work on that target. Of course, at the end of the day, we went with Kobold but Kevin left Barrick and has joined Midnight Sun as our Chief Operating Officer. So he will be our geological seat at the table with Cobalt. He will also be running all of our programs at First Quantum in order to define feed sources for the Kansanshi mine. So the highlights on Dumbwa. What are we going to be doing with Cobalt? Let's look at the deal itself. $15 million in exploration over the next 4.5 years. And it's important to understand that $15 million, there's no G&A. This is pure exploration dollars, money going in the ground, actual drilling. So it's very aggressive. And it's important to understand that gets us a critical number of meters of drilling. It's 40 to 50,000 meters, which has always been the magic number in this belt for defining critical mass in one of these very large deposits. There's also a cash component. It's $100,000 a year. Basically, it just covers our GA in Zambia, which is great. This will bring Cobalt to a 75% ownership of Dumbwa. But very important to understand, that is only Dumbwa. It leaves us full ownership of Kaziba, Crunch, and Me Too, and we still retain a 25% contributing interest in Dumbwa. Two key pieces. There is no partial earn-in on this project, so Cobalt has to go the distance for the full $15.5 million in order to get ownership. And there's also a follow-on agreement in place. Cobalt Metals is not looking to be an operator at this point. That may change, but it's very clear from their end that they're looking to be a passive mining operation. They want to retain a 20 to 30% interest in Dumbwa. And so our 25% would be matched with whatever percentage they want to sell, and that will be sold together. So our goal at the end of the day is M&A. We're very clear about that. We're not an operator. We don't intend to be an operator. But the exit for us and Cobalt is going to be simultaneous. But most importantly, we get a world-class geological team. And when I say that, I don't say it lightly. There are 200 geoscientists working for Cobalt today. There's 65 dedicated to copper alone, all being led by David Broughton. And David Broughton has handpicked each and every person that's working on these projects. So we get Dr. David Broughton, we get Kevin Bonnell, the two top experts in this region. Of course, Kevin works for us as our chief operating officer. David Broughton, who recommended this over 8 years ago, is now running this program, and we could not be happier. We literally have a geological dream team bringing this together. So that brings me to the second part of the Midnight Sun story, and this is a near-term production story. So we are working with First Quantum, and we announced back in April that we have what we're calling a cooperative exploration plan. And that is for oxide copper resources that are on our property. We're in the midst of now working at Kaziba, our number one target, to define those resources, see how big they are and how much material there is and how long a mine life might exist. But this is super exciting, something you see very rarely. And just to set the stage before I dive into the details, you hear a lot about things like toll mining. This is not that type of operation. This is a literal turnkey mining operation for Midnight Sun. It'd almost be easier to look at this, though it's not defined yet because we're still doing the formal mining agreement, almost more like a royalty story in the sense that we're going to be passive completely. We're going to allow First Quantum to do all the work on these targets once that initial resource is defined, and the only cost to Midnight Sun is drilling. So let me show you these two targets. We have, of course, everything on the west flank is surrounded in purple. Those are the areas we're going to be working with First Quantum, but specifically at Kaziba and at Me Too. So our northwest target, Kaziba, which is only 6 kilometers away from the Kansanshi pit, and Me Too down to the southwest, which is about 20 kilometers away. But you'll notice running right through the middle of that graphic is a haul road. That is a major highway. It's owned and run and maintained by First Quantum, and that is their haul road. It cuts right through our property. And of course, that makes things very, very easy. So in the case of both Me Too and Kaziba, they'll just need to build a small spur road in order to move material. And what we'll be doing is essentially addressing these two targets in succession. So the goal right off the bat is to go to Kaziba, where we already know we have significant oxide at surface. And of course, just to make it very clear, oxide copper is typically part of one of the sediment-hosted systems that might exist at depth. In the case of Kaziba, this is a mobilized oxide blanket. So what that means is in the top 50 meters, maybe 60 meters of material, right from surface down to 50 or 60 meters, you have this blanket of very high-grade material. And when I say very high grade, you can see a couple of the intercepts here, 14.2 meters of 5.7%, 24 meters of 3.15, 8 meters of 5.1. The intercepts across this zone are very, very high. And we so far have 31 drill holes into the target at Kaziba that we've basically utilized to look for the sediment-hosted system underneath. We now know that they're disconnected. So this mobilized blanket is right at surface, can be mined with an excavator. It's very, very, very simple. But we need to define that resource and see what we can do. So the program is now underway. Drilling will be taking place almost immediately, if not already underway. And we're doing three things. Our initial plan, when we went into this, and important to understand how this came about, when we were talking to First Quantum, we've had a 2-year dialogue with them. We knew that these resources were key to their operation going forward. We knew that there was going to be an opportunity to work together, but we thought that was further down the road. When we were financing this year, of course, we raised $10 million in May. The goal was to go out, once our cobalt deal was in place and they were working on Dumbwa, the goal was for us to go and define those resources so that we could go to First Quantum with a resource in hand and deliver that. It changed very quickly. We realized that First Quantum had run out of oxide copper at Kansanshi and they needed this material right away. And so we decided to work together, and that was what formed the cooperative exploration plan. And I'll explain to you very quickly how this plays out. At Kansanshi, they have 3 circuits. They have an oxide copper circuit, which is an SXEW circuit. That's key to our story. They also have their main circuit, which is a sulfide circuit, and a mixed ore circuit. They also have the most efficient copper smelter on the planet on site. And that smelter produces 1.3 million tons of sulfuric acid per year really it's an environmental liability, but it's a byproduct. And that needs to be dealt with. This is a landlocked country. You can't ship sulfuric acid across country boundaries, and you have to deal with it in situ. There's no local market for sulfuric acid. Any of the mines that have their own smelter on site deal with it in their own way. What First Quantum has been doing for 20 years is they take oxide copper, which again is material that sits right at surface. It's rich in malachite. That malachite neutralizes sulfuric acid. So they heap leach the copper oxide. That gets rid of their sulfuric acid, eliminates their environmental liability entirely, but it also liberates the copper in the oxides, which they have separate byproduct sale. This is something they've been doing for a long time. They basically take that copper, they concentrate it, it's electrowind into a plate, and it's sold, and that earns them between $250 and $400 million per year as a byproduct. So that's been working great for 20 years. Of course, First Quantum has lost Cobre Panama this past year. They have now run out of oxide copper. They're in desperate need of that material, both to ensure that they can eliminate their environmental liability of sulfuric acid and to keep that $300 million a year revenue stream going. So the answer to that, the solution to this issue is Midnight Sun. Kaziba and Mitu both have good quantities of oxide copper that are much higher grade than what they typically mine. And so now we're going in to do that. So we're going to work at Kaziba first. And how the cooperative exploration plan works is that First Quantum is dedicating an engineering team, a geological team. They're taking care of all of the assaying and metallurgical testing at Kansanshi. And that's helping us to expedite this and, of course, keep our costs down. So our initial plan was about 150 drill holes, 50 meter spacing, 50 meter depth, about $1 million price tag, and about a 6-month program. That has changed dramatically. With engineering from First Quantum and with their help, we've now broken that program down to less than 60 days. The cost has dropped from $1 million to about $400,000 to $500,000. And it's going to be made up of 3 components. We're going to be doing 3,000 meters of drilling. That's going to be a combination of reverse circulation and air core. We're going to be doing ionic leach sampling, which is a fantastic way of sampling. It's basically much quicker. You don't need to dry your samples. 250 gram samples, widespread across the entire zone, and it'll give them a sense of continuity and grade. At the end of the day, that's what First Quantum needs. First Quantum knows the material is there. We know the material is there. Based on the 31 drill holes we have today, we can put our arms around a 4 million ton target. We're aiming for somewhere between that and 15 million tons. And, ionic leach sampling is going to get us that number much more quickly than drilling. It'll be accurate. It's right at surface. This is easy to do. So ionic leach sampling, and last but not least, we're going to run IP over this target. And so all of that is happening in succession. And of course, we get asked, when are you going to drill? When is the drilling taking place? Everything is happening simultaneously. This program is happening very, very quickly, and it's going to be done very quickly. So, right now we're underway. They're working on all three components and kicking things off. So results are going to come very quickly. And again, those assays are being done at Kansanshi. So we don't have the typical lab delays. Kansanshi has an ALS lab on site. They will be doing, First Quantum will be doing all of those assays and met tests for us. So we're going to be heading into the end of the year here with drill results from Kaziba through the fall into the end of the year, and we'll know how big this resource is looking. But we currently have about a 300-meter footprint and 31 drill holes telling us that the starting point here is around 3.9 million tons at 1.3%. And that's another key point. They typically run about 0.2 to 0.3% through the oxide circuit at Kansanshi. What we're looking at Kaziba is in excess of 1% copper, all at surface with zero strip. So the secondary target we're going to go to is Me2. The plan here is to finish drilling at Kaziba, finish our work there, look at a secondary target at Kaziba that we're really excited about in order to build this even further. And then we're going to go down to Me2. So Me2 has a much bigger footprint than Kaziba. We're looking at something in the range of 30 to 50 million tons. And our goal here is to define this as quickly as possible and to move Me2 forward and get that into what would be a future mine plan. Once we're done with the initial drilling at both Kaziba and Me2, and Me2, it should be pointed out, is a longer term drill program. It's a much bigger target, it's roughly 5 times the size of Kaziba. So we're probably looking at a year of drilling and probably a cost of somewhere in the $1 million to $1.5 million range. Of course, both of those are fully funded, and we expect to be delivering material to Kansanshi inside of 12 months, and we look at cash flow in 2025. Cash flow will be very significant. If we're successful in defining the kind of resource we are, we know they have a 25,000 ton per day mill. We think we can fulfill that for the next, let's say, 7 to 10 years from Kaziba and Me2. So it's a super exciting thing for us to have this underway. We're underway now. As I mentioned, we're drilling, we're running IP, we're running ionic leach sampling, all of which is happening immediately. And we'll have updates on that very, very quickly. So we do have 3 other targets. I'm not going to go into them in detail today, but to say that Kaziba, Crunch, and Me2 all represent the same kind of possibility that Dumbwa has, only we own those 100%, and we're ready to move forward on those with cash flow from our First Quantum Oxide program, and we will be funded. So the 10 million we raised in May should be the last financing we need to do at Midnight Sun, but certainly gives us at least a few years of runway and gives us more than enough capital when you look at warrants that may come down in the future, and combined with cash flow expected next year, we're going to be in a great position to do all of this work without any further dilution and to keep things in great shape for Midnight Sun. So I'm going to zip forward quickly to our cap table, give you a quick look at that, and then I'm going to open this up to any questions that people may have, and we can dive right into that. So looking here, we have 165 million shares outstanding today. Fully diluted, we're over 200 million, roughly 210. We do have about 58 million warrants. That's a combination of warrants from the recent financing we did in May. Those are at 33 cents. We do expect those to come down at some point, but of course they have a 3-year term. We do have some warrants that are at 40 and 50 that expire in 2025. We're expecting to see capital from that next year, so that's another round of financing for us. Current market cap is around 52 million. Let's call it 50 million today, fluctuating around the 31 cent mark. And of course, following the closure of our financing, we did move up to over $100 million market cap with a high of 58 cents. And the stock is holding steady in there now as we drill and get ready to move forward. In terms of ownership, thanks to Red Cloud's hard work, of course, in conjunction with the financing in May, we now are proud to say that we have 16% institutional ownership. That is phenomenal and a major milestone for Midnight Sun. Insiders and directors are about 10 to 12%. And the stock's very closely held by some key players here in Vancouver. So with all of that, I am going to open it up to any questions anybody has. And Taylor, feel free to jump back in here so we can handle those as we go.
Perfect. Thank you, Adrian. We do have a fire alarm going off in our office here, so apologies for the noise.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, just a drill. So yeah, we'll turn to the Q&A portion of the webinar and just press forward here, and I'll mute myself when you're answering. But just a reminder to everybody on the line that you can type your questions in at any point. That said, we do have quite a few that have come in. Maybe just some simple ones here. I'll just read through them. Sure. Let's just start with somebody here asking about potential energy problems in Zambia. Could you comment on that? Are there any impacts on you?
Yeah, there's talk about rolling brownouts, things in Zambia. We haven't had any effect on Sean Stevens, also just one for the last comment there. That's pretty awesome, fire alarm and all. As far as the impact of Zambian energy issues, that it hasn't impacted us at all. You've got to remember, we're working here on exploration work. We're not in a position where it's had any impact, and we don't expect it to. So, obviously for operating mines, that may be problematic at certain times, but certainly no effect on Midnight Sun whatsoever.
Perfect. So I know there's a few questions that have come in on drilling, and I know you touched on it in your presentation. So I'm not sure if these came in before you did so or after, but maybe just give the high-level view of where you're at with drilling right now and kind of what the runway looks like for getting assays and news flow.
For sure. Yeah. So we get the question a lot right now, of course. Where do we sit in terms of the drilling? Is the drilling component at Kazhiba underway? And one of the things that I want to leave with people and make very clear is that the drilling is a key component of this program. Okay, 3,000 meters of drilling. It's drilling that's air core, it's reverse circulation, and a key part of defining that resource that exists at Kazhiba. But the ionic leach sampling that we're carrying out and the IP are just as important. And from the First Quantum standpoint, that ionic leach sampling program gives them the best view to continuity across the entire oxide blanket. We know the oxides are there. We've got 31 drill holes across this thing. We already know that there's a significant amount of material that can be excavator mined. And of course, this is right at surface with no strip. So this can be scooped up with an excavator, loaded into a dump truck, taken straight to Kansanshi and run through. The drilling will be taking place. We've already mobilized the team. We've mobilized rigs. So this is underway. As far as, are they drilling today? Or are they drilling next week? I don't have an update on the status of that. I'm letting the team do their job. But we're looking at a program that isn't 3 months or 6 months or 5 months. This is like a 45-day program that's a blitz to get that resource figured out and material going to Kansanshi. The minute we've got the material defined, we'll be putting the keys in First Quantum's hands. They'll be handling all the permit applications and everything else moving forward towards mine planning, pit planning, permitting, and all of that. So really right now, the key thing is all three components of the program are underway. They've moved forward. We've mobilized a team, and Kazhiba is underway. So this is going to be very quick, and coming into the end of the fall here, we're going to have some really, really great results. Time to get excited. Like it's underway, and it's going forth.
Perfect. And I know that with the drilling, it is very much dual purpose, both for the oxide, and you'll be able to get through that to test that sediment hosted potential as well. Exactly. Underneath. So it's quite a bit of data coming from that. So looking forward to seeing the results soon. I know you did touch on the licensing, and just kind of in the wrap up to your question there, it's going to be in First Quantum's hands going forward. Correct. Just with that, I guess, how is the with permitting and the large scale exploration license at Kazhiba? I know you got the extension for the site visit. Is that organized, and will that be taking place in due course?
Yeah, everything on that is taking place in due course. And of course, there's been a lot of questions about that. It does appear that it was simply a clerical error on part of the mines ministry. Obviously frustrating. These things are, we had a lot of momentum, and it certainly put a bit of a stall into our work and what we were doing. But at the end of the day, these things do happen, and rectifying it in kind of a record time from our standpoint, 10 to 14 days, we had it cleared up. And the last phase of that is this site visit that they do. It's completely standard course of action. They do it every time you have a renewal. That's all scheduled and planned. They gave us the extension. Of course, they needed that for their own time frame. So now we get that done, and that's the last piece of that process of the renewal. So we don't expect any issues whatsoever, and certainly moving forward with that, we can we can get that part completely put behind us once that's over and done with.
And we have a question here, just on that. Does that site visit and kind of finalizing that process have any impact on the current drill program to find the oxide?
Zero, nothing. There's no impact. The license is in our name. Everything's in good standing. These licenses are renewed every 3 years once your initial 4-year term is up. And then, of course, the plan would be, if we can be successful here with First Quantum, this will convert to a mining license, which is a 25-year license. It's completely different. So this puts us in great standing. We'll let them finish up. And then the next phase will be to move towards mining with our success with First Quantum. And we can start a whole new process with it.
Perfect. Okay. We have a question here just on Zambia, acknowledging that you've been active in there for a long time, of many juniors. And are you working on actively securing additional prospective ground?
That's an interesting question. As we sit right now, we have 506 square kilometers. So we have a massive property package right in the heart of the Domes region. So that isn't to say that we don't have other ideas and that we don't, our blinders are not on. Of course, if there's an opportunity and we can drive something forward that builds value for our shareholders, of course we would do that. But right now, we have a lot to focus on. We have not just an oxide program. We have 2 different oxide programs. We have drilling with cobalt at Dumbwa on what could be a very, very large transformative discovery. And then we have 3 other targets to address. So we're going to be very, very busy within that 506 square kilometers that we're currently working on.
Excellent. And I guess that would extend as well to down the road, potentially looking at any other sorry, no, apologies. Read the wrong question here. Okay. Next one here. Just wondering about listing in the U.S. Just wondering, you're only listed on the OTC. Is that correct in the U.S.?
Yeah, and of course, at this point in time, we don't have any interest in, or plans, I should say, in listing in the U.S. on a full scale, something like an NYSE listing. The reality is we're kind of in a perfect position. That OTC listing, of course, is kind of one of those automatic OTC listings that happens. It's not, we don't have a separate QB or QX listing, and our primary listing is venture.
Perfect. Okay. Let's see here. I think we've touched on most of the questions here. There's one on Cobalt with the partnership there. How does the relationship with them go regarding getting updates and what kind of news flow or news and updates are you able to give investors in that relationship?
Yeah, it's actually a really good question, and it's an important part of the program. With Cobalt, of course, it has to be remembered they're a private company. So they do not have the same requirements we have in terms of disclosure, in terms of drill results. Cobalt is very understanding of the fact that we are a public company, and being a smaller public company, we have not just a regulatory requirement, but we have necessity to make sure that we're working and bring results out constantly. So we have access to all of the data and all of the drill results in real time as the program progresses, and we'll have control over news flow. So that's to say that as they start drilling and they bring out drill results, we'll have the reins on when those go out, and we will be putting results out on a constant basis once they're underway.
Perfect. Okay. And just somebody asking for clarification or just reiterating kind of what we talked about Dumbwa. Actually, hold on. I'll just read the question here. Please ask when we start Dumbwa, or when we can expect cash flow deal to fall if the drill program will only take 45 days. So I'm not sure if they're conflating the two programs in two agreements you have.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think probably the, we do have, of course, the Dumbwa drilling has not started yet. So that could be the question there around Dumbwa. Certainly, as soon as we know that's in Cobalt's hands, of course, Cobalt is the operator on that program. So we have to remember that that's in their hands, and that is happening. So as soon as they start drilling at Dumbwa, then we'll get notice of that, and we'll be able to put out, just putting out information to the start of that. I'm seeing these questions coming up in real time as well. So to be clear, they are not drilling at Dumbwa that I know of yet. I know they're in the planning process of putting the drill rigs on the targets they need to get into. But again, it's Cobalt's program, not ours. It's our property. We own it. They're running the program. So that's at their discretion. They're driving the ship on that one. So we're awaiting information. When we have it, we will, of course, put that forth to our shareholders in an update. But we don't have any news on that yet. Waiting to find out. With regard to the second part of the question, and that was regarding cash flow around the fall program, what you have to look at is there's a bit of a process here where, number one, we have to go out and run the program. So let's call it, as I said, somewhere under 60 days. I don't have an exact number of days. I don't know if it's 30 days or 45 to total completion, but short program. It's very quick. It's very, very concise. Once it's done, we're going to be addressing a couple of things. There was another question here that I noticed from one of our shareholders regarding oxides and whether we're drilling into just oxides or deeper sulfides. This program will actually address both in two separate targets. You'll note that I said that Kaziba is a mobilized oxide blanket, but we do have a sulfide target or a secondary oxide target as well. So we're going to test the horizon. What we really want to know there is, where is the transition zone? So if you can imagine that material at Kaziba is a 50-meter layer that sits right at surface, under there somewhere, the mobilized blanket is somewhere detached from the original sulfide source. But we want to test the horizon and see if we can figure out where that transition zone is. And it may be on a secondary target. We do have a second target we're going to address at Kaziba. It's a new target. It has all the makings of either another oxide blanket or perhaps the sulfide source of that original sulfide or oxide blanket. So we are going to test both of those. And yes, we will be testing for some sulfides at Kaziba as well. In terms of cash flow around that, we do not have a formal mining agreement in place yet with First Quantum, though we're working on it. We will be working on the drilling, defining the resource, and putting that in place. But there's lots of work that has to go on over the next 10 months or so before that can turn into a mining operation, the first of which is permitting. Permitting, mine planning, pit planning, and engineering around how this stuff is actually mined. But again, it's excavator mining. This is literally scooping material up at surface and taking it to the mine. So it's very quick and very simple, but that process still has to be done, and that will be First Quantum. And they'll be driving that portion of it. That's their end of the cooperative exploration plan.
Okay, perfect. So I think we've addressed all the questions in the chat here. Then that fire alarm has stopped, so I'm a little easier for me to concentrate now. So with that, maybe I'll give you a final word, Adrian, before I wrap things up here. If you have a final thought for investors or anything you'd like to leave the viewers with.
Yeah, I think the reality is we have taken Midnight Sun from something that is, it's been a great story for a long time. This project's been in our hands for 12 years. It's very, very tough to develop a project of this magnitude in tough copper markets and in tough markets in general. But we've managed to do that. We've stuck around. We've leveraged things forward. We've taken the steps we could and that we were able to. But in the last 18 months, we have reached critical mass. We've got two major deals in place. We're working with First Quantum. We're working with Cobalt. And we're going to be addressing all of these different targets to maximize the potential of this project. We're now underway. We're at Kaziba. We're working. We're doing what we said we were going to do. Now it comes down to execution. There's a lot of different components here that are going to affect timing, but we're obviously doing everything we can to stick to those plans, get things done, and we do have things like the rainy season to contend with. That does exist in Zambia. It's very short, but it makes certain things like moving drill rigs difficult. So the goal here now is to get as much done this year as we can. Kazhiba is going to be attacked full force. The program is underway, and now we get to see just how significant that resource is and what that's going to mean for Midnight Sun under our cooperative exploration plan with First Quantum. So we're on the cusp of all the things we've been looking forward to for so many years, and it's about to get really exciting.
Perfect. So we'll leave it there. We're coming up on the hour, so it's been an excellent webinar. So thank you very much, Adrian. I appreciate you spending the time with us to discuss Midnight Sun. And thank you to everybody on the line for tuning in with us today.
Excellent. Really appreciate it, Taylor. This was great, and great to have the opportunity to give everyone an update and an overview of the project.